The rain hammered against the glass windows of the Metropolitan Grand Hotel's ballroom, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the charity gala that had brought together New York's elite. Among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, Marcus Wellington stood near the bar, his champagne untouched as he surveyed the crowd with the practiced indifference of someone who had attended too many of these events. At 42, he had built an empire in real estate development that spanned 3 continents. But tonight, like most nights lately, the achievement felt hollow. It had been 5 years since the divorce. 5 years since he had signed those papers in his lawyer's mahogany-paneled office. His hand surprisingly steady despite the way his heart had fractured. 5 years since he had last seen Victoria Hayes walk out of his life, taking with her the only light that had ever truly mattered. The divorce had been her idea, her insistence, and despite his protests, despite his pleas for counseling or time or anything that might salvage what they had built together, she had been immovable. Cold, even. It was the coldness that had hurt most. The way she had looked at him as though he were a stranger, as though their 7 years of marriage had meant nothing at all. Marcus had thrown himself into work after that, acquiring companies, developing properties, making deals that other men only dreamed of. Forbes had called him the Midas of Manhattan. Business Weekly had featured him on their cover with the headline, "The Man Who Never Loses." But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that he had lost the only thing that mattered, and no amount of money or success could fill that void. He was about to leave the gala early, a habit he had perfected over the years, when he saw her. Victoria stood across the room, partially obscured by a marble column, but he would have recognized her anywhere. Her auburn hair was longer now, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, and she wore a deep emerald dress that made her green eyes even more striking. She looked different somehow, more vibrant, more alive than he remembered from those final months of their marriage when she had seemed to fade before his eyes, becoming a ghost in their penthouse apartment. But it wasn't just Victoria that made Marcus freeze, his breath catching in his throat. Beside her stood a boy, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, with dark curly hair and eyes that were unmistakably familiar. The child held Victoria's hand, looking up at her with complete trust and adoration, and when he smiled at something she said, Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. The boy had his exact eyes, that unusual shade of dark blue that Marcus had inherited from his own father. The same slight dimple in the left cheek when he smiled, the same way of tilting his head when listening intently. Marcus's mind raced, calculating dates, counting backwards. 5 years since the divorce. The boy appeared to be about 4, maybe closer to 5, which meant... His hands trembled as he set down his champagne glass, the crystal clinking against the marble bar top. It couldn't be. Victoria would have told him, wouldn't she? But even as he thought it, memories flooded back. That last night before she had asked for the divorce. They had attended a similar gala, had too much wine, and for one night, the distance that had grown between them had vanished. They had reconnected with the passion that had first brought them together, and Marcus had dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The next morning, Victoria had been distant again, and 3 weeks later, she had asked for the divorce. He had been devastated, confused, unable to understand what had changed. She had refused to give him real answers, saying only that they wanted different things, that she needed a different life. He had assumed another man, perhaps, or simply that she had fallen out of love with him. He had never imagined this. Marcus moved through the crowd like a man in a dream, his eyes never leaving Victoria and the boy. As he drew closer, he could hear the child's voice, bright and curious, asking his mother about the chandelier overhead. Victoria's laugh was soft and warm, the kind of laugh Marcus hadn't heard from her in years before the divorce. She seemed genuinely happy, and that realization cut deeper than anything else. Victoria. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She turned, and the color drained from her face. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the 3 feet of polished floor that separated them. The boy looked up at Marcus with open curiosity, but Victoria's hand tightened protectively on his shoulder. Marcus. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know you'd be here. The Wellington Foundation is hosting," he said, his eyes dropping to the child. "Who's this?" Victoria's jaw tightened, and something flashed in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. "This is my son, Christopher." "Your son," Marcus repeated, and the emphasis wasn't lost on either of them. "How old is he?" 4.5, she said quickly. Too quickly. Marcus crouched down to the boy's level, his heart pounding so hard he was certain everyone in the ballroom could hear it. Hi, Christopher. That's a great name. Thank you, the boy said politely, with the careful enunciation of a child who had been taught good manners. My mommy says I was named after my grandfather. Marcus looked up at Victoria, something breaking open inside his chest. Christopher, his father's name. The father who had died 2 months before Marcus and Victoria's wedding, who Victoria had adored, and who had walked her down the aisle in place of her own absent father. Victoria, Marcus said, standing slowly. We need to talk. There's nothing to discuss, she said. But her voice wavered. She was already pulling Christopher closer, preparing to flee, just as she had fled 5 years ago. Don't, Marcus said, and the single word carried the weight of every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every moment he had spent wondering what he had done wrong. Don't run from me again. Not this time. Not when I'm looking at a child who has my eyes and my father's name and who's exactly the right age to have been conceived that last night we were together. Victoria's composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes. Christopher looked between them, confused and starting to look worried. Around them, a few people were beginning to notice the tension, whispers starting to ripple through the nearby crowd. Please, Victoria whispered. Not here. Not like this. Marcus wanted to rage, wanted to demand answers immediately, but one look at Christopher's frightened face made him swallow his anger. Whatever Victoria had done, whatever her reasons, the boy was innocent. And if Christopher was his son, and every instinct Marcus possessed was screaming that he was, then the child's well-being had to come first. Tomorrow, Marcus said firmly. My office, 10 a.m. Don't make me come looking for you, Victoria, because I will. And this time, I'll have my lawyers with me if necessary. Victoria nodded, a single tear escaping down her cheek. She scooped Christopher up into her arms, the boy wrapping his small arms around her neck, and Marcus watched them disappear into the crowd, his mind reeling. As he stood there, alone again in a room full of people, Marcus realized that his carefully reconstructed life had just been demolished. Because if that boy was his son, and he knew in his bones that he was, then everything he had believed about his divorce, about Victoria, about the last 5 years, was built on a lie, and he was going to find out why. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse apartment, the same one he had once shared with Victoria before she insisted on taking nothing in the divorce settlement, and stared out at the Manhattan skyline as dawn slowly broke over the city. His mind replayed every moment of their marriage, searching for clues he had missed, signs that might explain why Victoria would hide his own child from him. They had met 8 years ago at an art gallery opening in Chelsea. Victoria had been working as a curator's assistant, passionate about contemporary art and full of dreams about opening her own gallery someday. Marcus had been immediately captivated by her intelligence, her warmth, her ability to see beauty in things others overlooked. Their courtship had been intense and swift. Engaged within 6 months, married a year after they met. The first few years had been blissful. Victoria had supported his business ventures while pursuing her own career, and they had talked endlessly about their future together. Children, a house in Connecticut for weekends, traveling the world. But somewhere around year 5, things had shifted. Victoria had become withdrawn, canceling plans at the last minute, spending more time alone. Marcus had attributed it to stress from her job, where funding cuts threatened the museum where she worked. He had tried to help, even offering to finance her own gallery, but she had refused, and the distance between them had grown. Now, watching the sun rise over the East River, Marcus wondered if he had been blind. Had there been signs of pregnancy that he had missed? Had she been suffering alone while he had been consumed with a merger deal that had taken him to Hong Kong for 3 weeks? The thought made him sick. At 9:30, Marcus was already in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Wellington Tower. His assistant, Patricia, a efficient woman in her 50s who had worked for him for 15 years, brought him his 3rd coffee of the morning and raised an eyebrow at his disheveled appearance. "Rough night, Mr. Wellington? You could say that," Marcus muttered, checking his watch for the 100th time. "I'm expecting a visitor at 10. Victoria Hayes. When she arrives, bring her directly to me. No delays." Patricia's eyes widened slightly. She remembered Victoria from the marriage, but she was too professional to comment. "Of course, sir." 10 o'clock came and went. By 10:15, Marcus was pacing. By 10:30, he was reaching for his phone to call his lawyers when Patricia's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Wellington, Ms. Hayes is here." "Send her in." Victoria entered his office alone, and Marcus felt a stab of disappointment that she hadn't brought Christopher. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept either. She stood near the door, her arms wrapped around herself defensively. "Close the door," Marcus said quietly. She did, then remained standing, her eyes not quite meeting his. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 5 years of unanswered questions. "Is he mine?" Marcus finally asked, his voice rough. Victoria's eyes closed, and when she opened them again, they were bright with tears. "Yes." The simple word hit him like a physical blow. He had known, had been certain, but hearing her confirm it made it real in a way that shattered something inside him. "How could you?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "How could you keep my son from me? How could you let me believe?" His voice broke and he turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. "I had my reasons," Victoria said, and there was steel beneath the tears in her voice. What reasons could possibly justify this? Marcus spun back to face her, anger finally breaking through. "I had a right to know. He had a right to know his father. What reason could be worth stealing 5 years of my son's life from me?" "Because I was protecting him," Victoria's voice rose, matching his intensity. "I was protecting him from the same thing that would have destroyed our marriage anyway." Marcus stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" Victoria moved further into the room, her hands clenched at her sides. "Do you remember the night Christopher was conceived? That gala, the one for the children's hospital?" "Of course I remember. It was the last good night we had together." "It was the night I realized I couldn't stay married to you," Victoria said, and her voice cracked. "Because earlier that day, I had found something." "Do you remember that lunch meeting you had canceled? The one with the Anderson group?" Marcus frowned, trying to recall. "Vaguely. There was some conflict with another meeting." "There was no conflict," Victoria said. "I know because I was having lunch 2 blocks away with my friend Jennifer, and I saw you, coming out of Dr. Morrison's office on Park Avenue." The color drained from Marcus's face. "Dr. Robert Morrison, the oncologist." "Victoria, you were on your phone, looking devastated, and you didn't see me," she continued, her voice shaking. "So I did something I'm not proud of. I followed you. And then I called the doctor's office, pretending to be your assistant, asking about your next appointment. They told me everything, Marcus. The diagnosis, the treatment options, the prognosis." Marcus sank into his chair, the fight draining out of him. The secret he had kept buried for 5 years was finally exposed, and he felt oddly relieved and terrified at the same time. "You had stage 2 pancreatic cancer," Victoria whispered. "They gave you a 30% chance with aggressive treatment, and you never told me." "I didn't want to burden you," Marcus said hoarsely. "I was going to tell you after I started treatment, after I had a plan. I just needed time to process it myself first." "But you didn't start treatment, did you?" Victoria moved closer, her eyes searching his face. "Because 3 weeks later, when I asked for the divorce, you stopped all your medical appointments. I know because I checked. I had a friend who worked at the hospital and she told me you had canceled everything." Marcus looked up at her, stunned. "You were monitoring my medical records?" "I was terrified," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face now. "I found out I was pregnant the same week I found out about your cancer. And I realized that if I stayed, if you knew about the baby, you would have had one more reason to fight. One more thing tying you to life. But what if the treatment didn't work? What if you suffered through months or years of chemotherapy and radiation? And Christopher had to watch his father waste away and die? What if I had to explain to a 3-year-old why Daddy was too sick to play? Why Daddy was in the hospital? Why Daddy wasn't coming home? So you left," Marcus said, understanding finally dawning. "You left to protect Christopher from the pain of losing me." "I left to protect both of you," Victoria said. "Because I also knew that if you had known about the baby, you might have refused treatment altogether, wanting to spend whatever time you had left with us instead of in hospitals, and I couldn't let you make that choice. I couldn't be responsible for taking away any chance you had at survival." Marcus stood, moving around the desk toward her. Victoria, I need you to understand something. That cancer? I beat it. I went through hell with the treatment, but I've been in remission for over 4 years. I'm cancer-free. Victoria's legs seemed to give out, and Marcus caught her, guiding her to the leather couch near the window. She was trembling, her breath coming in short gasps. "You're okay?" she whispered. "You're really okay?" "I'm okay," Marcus confirmed, sitting beside her but maintaining a careful distance. "But Victoria, you made a decision that wasn't yours to make. You took away my choice, and you took away 5 years of my son's life that I can never get back." "I know," she sobbed. "I know, and I've regretted it every single day. Christopher asks about his father constantly. He wants to know why he doesn't have a daddy like the other kids at his preschool. And I've had to lie to him, Marcus. I've had to tell him that his father lives far away, that maybe someday he'll meet him. Because how do I explain to a 4-year-old that I made the worst decision of my life out of fear and love and desperation?" Marcus closed his eyes, processing everything. Part of him wanted to rage at her, to call his lawyers and demand full custody out of spite. But another part, the part that had never stopped loving her, understood the impossible position she had been in. She had made a choice based on incomplete information, trying to protect everyone while sacrificing her own happiness in the process. "Does Christopher know anything about me?" Marcus asked finally. Victoria wiped her eyes. "He knows your name. He knows you're a businessman. I've shown him pictures of us from before, the ones I couldn't bear to throw away. He's smart, Marcus. So smart. And he has your stubborn streak and your sense of humor. He makes me laugh every day, and every time he does, I see you in him. I want to meet him properly," Marcus said. "Not at a gala, not in passing. I want to be his father, Victoria. I've missed 5 years. I don't want to miss another day." "I know," Victoria said. "That's why I came here. Not just to explain, but to ask you, to beg you, to let me tell him first, to prepare him. He's been through so much already, and I need to do this right." Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to demand immediate access to his son, but he forced himself to think rationally. Christopher's well-being had to come first, regardless of his own desires. "1 week," he said finally. "You have 1 week to tell him, to prepare him, and then I want to meet him, really meet him. And after that, Victoria, we're going to figure out a custody arrangement, because I'm not going to be a weekend father. I'm not going to be someone who exists on the periphery of his life." Victoria nodded, relief and fear warring on her face. 1 week. I promise." She stood to leave, but Marcus caught her hand. "Victoria, why did you come to that gala last night? You had to know there was a chance I'd be there." She looked down at their joined hands, and a sad smile crossed her face. "Because it was the Children's Hospital benefit. The same one from 5 years ago, and some part of me thought maybe it was time for the truth to come out. Maybe I was tired of running, or maybe I just wanted to see you one more time and know that you were okay." She pulled her hand away gently and walked to the door. Just before she left, she turned back. "For what it's worth, Marcus, leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. And not a day has gone by that I haven't wondered if I made the right choice." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in his office with the knowledge that his life was about to change in ways he could barely comprehend. He had a son, a 4.5-year-old boy named Christopher, who carried his father's name and his eyes, and who had been hidden from him out of misguided love. Marcus walked to the window and looked out over the city, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. In 1 week, he would meet his son. And somehow, he would have to figure out how to be a father to a child who didn't know him, how to forgive a woman who had broken his heart to save his life, and how to build a future from the shattered pieces of the past. The week that followed was the longest of Marcus's life. He tried to focus on work, but found himself constantly distracted, staring at his phone and waiting for updates from Victoria that never came. He had agreed to give her space to prepare Christopher, but the waiting was excruciating. Every moment that passed felt like another moment stolen from him. On the 3rd day, he did something impulsive. He hired a private investigator, not to spy on Victoria, but simply to learn about the life his son had been living without him. The report came back within 48 hours, and Marcus spent an entire evening reading through it, absorbing every detail. Victoria lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, a far cry from the luxury she could have demanded in the divorce settlement. She worked as an art teacher at a local community center, teaching underprivileged children. Christopher attended a well-regarded preschool nearby, where teachers noted he was bright, curious, and exceptionally kind to other children. The report included photos: Christopher at the playground, Christopher leaving school with his backpack, Christopher and Victoria at the farmer's market on Saturday morning, laughing together over a bunch of sunflowers. Marcus traced his finger over one photo where Christopher was mid-laugh, his head thrown back in pure joy, and felt his heart constrict. This was his son. This beautiful, happy child was his, and he had missed every moment of his short life so far. On the 6th day, Victoria finally called. "He knows," she said without preamble, her voice thick with emotion. "I told him everything. Well, everything a 4-year-old can understand. I showed him more pictures, told him stories about you, about us. Marcus, he's so excited. He's been asking me every 5 minutes when he can meet his daddy." Marcus's throat tightened. "His daddy," he repeated softly. "How did he take it? Was he angry that I hadn't been there?" "Children are remarkably forgiving," Victoria said. "I told him that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, and that I had made a big one by keeping you apart. I told him that you didn't know about him, but that now you do, and you want very much to be part of his life. He asked if that meant he could call you Daddy, and I said yes." Marcus had to sit down, his legs suddenly weak. "When can I see him?" "Tomorrow," Victoria said. "Come to our apartment. Come for lunch. It'll be less overwhelming for him than a restaurant or somewhere public. Is noon okay?" "I'll be there at 11:30, Marcus said, and Victoria's soft laugh came through the phone. "Of course you will. Marcus? Please be patient with him. He might be shy at first, or he might talk your ear off. I honestly don't know how he'll react when it becomes real. I'll follow his lead," Marcus promised. "Victoria? Thank you for telling him. For giving me this chance." There was a long pause. "You're his father. You always were. I just wish I'd been brave enough to trust that sooner." The next morning, Marcus stood outside Victoria's apartment building in Brooklyn, clutching a wrapped box and feeling more nervous than he had before any business negotiation in his life. He had spent hours the previous evening in a toy store, overwhelmed by choices, before finally selecting a high-quality building set that the store clerk assured him was perfect for Christopher's age group. Now, standing here, he worried it was too much, or not enough, or completely wrong. He buzzed the apartment, and Victoria's voice crackled through the intercom. "Come up. 4th floor. Apartment 4C. The building was old but well-maintained, with worn marble stairs and vintage ironwork. Marcus climbed slowly, his heart pounding harder with each step. When he reached the 4th floor, the apartment door was already open, and Victoria stood in the doorway. She looked different in her own space, more relaxed, dressed in jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. "He's in his room," she said quietly. "He wanted to put on his special shirt for meeting you. Come in." The apartment was small but warm, filled with artwork and photographs. Marcus noticed immediately that there were pictures of him throughout, wedding photos on the bookshelf, a candid shot of him laughing at some long-ago dinner party, even one from their honeymoon in Italy. Christopher had grown up seeing his father's face, even if he hadn't known who the man in the pictures was. "Christopher," Victoria called gently, "your daddy's here." A door down the short hallway opened, and Christopher emerged, wearing what was clearly his favorite shirt, a blue button-down with dinosaurs on it. He stopped when he saw Marcus, suddenly shy, and half hid behind the doorframe. Marcus's breath caught. Seeing his son at the gala had been shocking, but this, seeing him here, in his home, knowing that this was his child, was overwhelming. He crouched down, making himself less imposing, and smiled. "Hi, Christopher. It's really nice to finally meet you properly." Christopher studied him seriously, those familiar blue eyes taking in every detail. "You look just like the pictures," he said finally. "Mommy said you would." "Your mommy was right," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "And you look exactly like I did when I was your age. My mom, your grandmother, showed me pictures once." "I have a grandmother?" Christopher's eyes widened with wonder, and he stepped fully into the room now, curiosity overtaking shyness. "You have lots of family you haven't met yet," Marcus said. "But we have plenty of time for that. Right now I just want to get to know you." Is that okay?" Christopher nodded solemnly, then noticed the wrapped box in Marcus's hands. "Is that for me?" "It is," Marcus said, offering it. "I heard you like building things." Christopher took the box carefully, then looked up at Victoria for permission. She nodded, smiling through tears she was trying to hide, and Christopher tore into the wrapping with the enthusiasm of any 4-year-old. When he saw the building set, his face lit up with pure delight. "This is the big one!" he exclaimed. "The one I saw at the store. Mommy said maybe for my birthday, but my birthday isn't until December, and that's so far away." He looked up at Marcus with something approaching awe. "Thank you, Daddy." The word hit Marcus like a freight train. Daddy. His son had just called him Daddy, naturally and easily, as if he'd been waiting his whole life to say it. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes and didn't try to hide them. "You're very welcome, buddy," he managed to say. The next few hours passed in a blur that Marcus wanted to freeze and hold on to forever. They sat on the living room floor, building increasingly elaborate structures with the new set, while Christopher chattered endlessly about preschool, his best friend Tyler, his favorite dinosaur, Triceratops, and approximately 1,000 other things that 4-year-olds find fascinating. Victoria made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, Christopher's favorite, and Marcus found himself at the small kitchen table, eating comfort food and listening to his son explain the complex social dynamics of preschool politics. And then Tyler said that girls can't be astronauts. But that's not true, right, Daddy? Because Mommy told me that lots of girls are astronauts and scientists and everything. "Your mommy is absolutely right," Marcus said, catching Victoria's eye across the table. She smiled, a genuine smile that reminded him painfully of earlier, happier times. "Girls can be anything they want to be, just like boys can be anything they want to be. I want to be a builder," Christopher announced. "Like you. Mommy says you build big buildings all over the world." "I do," Marcus confirmed. "Maybe someday I can take you to see some of them." "Would you like that?" "Really?" Christopher's eyes went wide. "Could I go on an airplane?" "Christopher," Victoria interjected gently, "that's something we'd have to plan for later, okay? Finish your lunch." But Marcus saw the longing in his son's face and made a silent promise to himself. He would take Christopher everywhere, show him everything, make up for every missed moment in whatever way he could. After lunch, Christopher started to yawn, fighting to keep his eyes open even as he insisted he wasn't tired. Victoria caught Marcus's eye and mouthed, "Nap time." And Marcus felt a pang of disappointment that his time with his son was already ending. "I think someone needs a rest," Victoria said gently, scooping Christopher up. "Say goodbye to your daddy for now." "But I don't want him to leave," Christopher protested, suddenly clinging to Marcus with surprising strength. "What if he doesn't come back?" The fear in his son's voice broke Marcus's heart. He knelt down so they were eye level. "Christopher, I promise you, I'm coming back. I'm going to come back as many times as your mommy says is okay, and we're going to spend lots and lots of time together. You're my son, and I'm not going anywhere, okay?" Christopher studied his face, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Will you come back tomorrow?" Marcus looked at Victoria, who nodded. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised, "and we can build more things together." Satisfied, Christopher allowed Victoria to carry him to his room. Marcus stood in the living room, surrounded by the scattered building blocks and half-eaten sandwiches, and felt his carefully constructed world shift on its axis. This was real. He was a father. And somehow, he had to figure out how to navigate this new reality with a woman he had never stopped loving and a son he was only beginning to know. When Victoria returned, she looked exhausted, but also lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. They stood awkwardly in the small living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. "He loves you already," Victoria said softly. "I knew he would." "Victoria, we need to talk," Marcus said. "Really talk. About custody, about our future, about..." He paused, struggling with words. "About us." Victoria shook her head. "Not yet. Let's just focus on Christopher for now. Let him adjust. Let you two build your relationship, the legal stuff, the complicated stuff. It can wait a few more weeks, can't it?" Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to insist on having everything settled immediately, but he recognized the wisdom in her words. Christopher had to be the priority. Everything else could wait. A few weeks, he agreed. But Victoria? I meant what I said. I'm not going to be a peripheral figure in his life. I want to be a real father to him. I know, she said. And you will be. You already are. She walked him to the door, and just before he left, she touched his arm. Marcus, I really am sorry. For everything. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face, the face he had loved for so many years, that he had mourned losing. I know you are. And I'm sorry too. Sorry I wasn't honest with you about the cancer. Sorry I made you feel like you had to protect me. We both made mistakes, Victoria said. Maybe we can learn from them. As Marcus walked back down the 4 flights of stairs and out into the Brooklyn afternoon, he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Hope that he could build a relationship with his son. Hope that maybe, somehow, he and Victoria could find their way back to being at least friends, if not something more. Hope that the future might be brighter than the past had been dark. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Victoria. He's asking for you already. Same time tomorrow? Marcus smiled, typing back. I'll be there. Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus became a fixture in Christopher's life. He came to the apartment almost daily, sometimes for just an hour after work, sometimes for entire weekends. He learned his son's routines, his fears, his dreams. He learned that Christopher was afraid of thunderstorms but loved the rain, that he insisted on wearing mismatched socks because it made him feel special, and that he had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was sad and would offer hugs without being asked. Marcus also learned what it meant to be a father. The exhaustion, the joy, the constant worry, and the overwhelming love that made everything else in life seem trivial by comparison. He attended Christopher's preschool Halloween parade, dressed as a dinosaur, because Christopher had begged him to match his Triceratops costume. He sat through countless readings of the same 3 bedtime stories, doing all the voices until his throat was hoarse. He kissed scraped knees, refereed arguments between Christopher and his toys, and discovered that he would quite literally do anything to see his son smile. Victoria watched all of this with a mixture of relief and something else, something that looked almost like regret. They were cordial with each other, carefully polite, dancing around the obvious tension that still existed between them. But Marcus noticed small things. The way Victoria's eyes would linger on him when she thought he wasn't looking. The catch in her breath when their hands accidentally touched, reaching for the same toy. The sadness that crossed her face when he said goodbye each evening. It was December 15th, Christopher's 5th birthday, when everything finally came to a head. Marcus had planned an elaborate celebration at his penthouse. He had spent weeks preparing, hiring decorators to transform the space into a dinosaur wonderland, arranging for entertainment, and inviting Christopher's entire preschool class, plus their parents. It was excessive, he knew, but he had missed 4 birthdays already. He wanted this one to be perfect. Victoria had protested initially, saying it was too much, but Christopher's excitement had overruled her objections. Now, watching his son run through the penthouse with a pack of other 5-year-olds, wearing a birthday crown and shrieking with laughter, Marcus felt a contentment he had never experienced in any business deal. The party was winding down, parents collecting their exhausted children, when Christopher tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, can I show Tyler my room here?" Marcus froze. He hadn't prepared a room for Christopher. Hadn't wanted to presume too much too soon. But Christopher was looking up at him with such innocence, such automatic assumption that of course he would have a room in his father's home, that Marcus's heart clenched. "Buddy, I don't have a room set up for you yet," Marcus said carefully. "But how about we go look at the guest room, and you can tell me how you'd like to decorate it. Then we can make it your special room." Christopher's face lit up, and he grabbed his friend's hand, dragging him toward the hallway. Victoria, who had been cleaning up wrapping paper nearby, stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "You're setting up a room for him," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Of course I am," Marcus replied. "Victoria, we need to talk about custody arrangements, real arrangements. It's been 6 weeks. Christopher is comfortable with me now. He needs to know that he has 2 homes, 2 parents who are fully committed to him." "I know," Victoria said, and there was something defeated in her voice. "I've been avoiding this conversation because I'm terrified of what it means." "What does it mean?" Marcus asked, moving closer. Victoria looked around at the penthouse, at the expensive furniture, the stunning view, the remnants of a birthday party that had probably cost more than she made in 3 months. It means you can give him everything I can't. This place, those opportunities, the best schools, travel, experiences I could never afford. How do I compete with that? This isn't a competition, Marcus said firmly. And Christopher doesn't need things, Victoria. He needs love, stability, and parents who put him first. You've given him that for 5 years on your own. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I'm trying to be part of his life, but what does that look like? Victoria's voice cracked. Split custody? Him shuttling between Brooklyn and Manhattan? Different rules, different standards? I've read the stories, Marcus. I know how these situations usually play out. The parent with more money, more resources, gradually becomes the primary parent. Is that really what you think of me? Marcus demanded, anger flaring. That I would use my wealth to push you out of our son's life? No, Victoria said quickly. No, I know you wouldn't do that intentionally, but it happens anyway. And I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared of losing him. And I'm scared of... She stopped abruptly, turning away. Scared of what? Marcus pressed, moving around to face her. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears. I'm scared of having to watch you build a life with someone else. Of some other woman becoming a mother figure to my son. Of Christopher coming home talking about Daddy's new girlfriend. Or worse, Daddy's new wife. I gave him up once to protect him, Marcus. I don't think I can bear to lose him again in a different way. The confession hung in the air between them, and Marcus realized with sudden clarity what should have been obvious all along. Victoria still loved him. Perhaps she had never stopped, and he had been so focused on Christopher, so consumed with being a father, that he had ignored the truth he had known from the moment he saw her at that gala. He had never stopped loving her either. Victoria, he said softly, reaching out to cup her face in his hands. There is no one else. There hasn't been anyone since you left. I tried once or twice to move on, but it never worked because they weren't you. They could never be you. Marcus, don't, Victoria whispered, but she didn't pull away. We can't go back. Too much has happened. Too many lies. Too much hurt. You're right, Marcus agreed. We can't go back. But maybe we could go forward. Maybe we could build something new, something better. With the honesty we should have had the first time around. I don't know if I can trust myself to make the right decisions anymore, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face now. I thought I was protecting you both, and instead I stole 5 years from you and made everything harder for Christopher. What if I'm wrong again? Then we'll be wrong together, Marcus said. Victoria, I spent 5 years building an empire that meant nothing because I didn't have you or Christopher to share it with. I don't want that life anymore. I want messy mornings and bedtime stories and birthday parties with too much cake. I want to watch our son grow up, and I want to do it with you, if you'll give us another chance. Our son, Victoria repeated, a watery smile breaking through the tears. You said our son. He is ours, Marcus said firmly. He always was. And we're better parents together than apart. We're better people together than apart. I know that now. Victoria searched his face, and Marcus saw the moment she made her decision. It was there in the softening of her eyes, the way she leaned into his touch, the small nod that was barely perceptible. I never stopped loving you, she confessed. Not for a single day. It was torture, staying away, pretending I didn't want to call you every time Christopher did something amazing or funny or sweet. You should have been there for all of it, and I'm so sorry I took that from you. We can't change the past, Marcus said, but we can choose our future. So I'm asking you, Victoria Hayes, will you marry me again? Will you let me be not just Christopher's father, but your husband? Will you trust me enough to build a life together? One where we tell each other the truth even when it's terrifying? Victoria laughed through her tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. You didn't even get down on one knee. I'll do it properly later, Marcus promised, grinning now, hope flooding through him. With a ring and flowers and whatever romantic gesture you want. But right now, I just need to know, is there a chance for us? Before Victoria could answer, Christopher's voice rang out from down the hallway. Daddy, Mommy, come see. I found the perfect room. They looked at each other and laughed, the tension finally breaking. Marcus took Victoria's hand, and together they walked down the hallway to where their son was standing in the doorway of the guest room, bouncing with excitement. "This one," Christopher announced. "It has a big window where I can see the whole city, and there's space for all my dinosaurs. Can we make it blue? Blue is my favorite color. And can Mommy help decorate it? Because Mommy is really good at making things pretty." Marcus looked at Victoria, squeezing her hand. "What do you think? Should we decorate it together?" Victoria understood the question beneath the question. She looked around the room, then at Christopher's eager face, then finally at Marcus. "Together," she agreed softly. "We should definitely do this together." Christopher cheered and launched himself at both of them, wrapping his small arms around their legs. Marcus and Victoria knelt down together, embracing their son, and for the first time in 5 years, Marcus felt whole. Over the next few months, they took things slowly. Victoria and Christopher moved into the penthouse, but Victoria insisted on keeping her apartment as a safety net until she was sure they could make it work. They went to counseling, both couples therapy and family therapy, determined to do things right this time. They learned to communicate honestly, to share their fears without letting those fears control their decisions. Marcus stepped back from some of his business ventures, hiring more executives to handle the daily operations so he could be present for Christopher's school events, doctor's appointments, and the 1,000 other small moments that made up a childhood. Victoria opened her own small gallery in Chelsea, funded by Marcus but run entirely by her vision and expertise. It was a dream she had set aside during their first marriage, and watching her thrive in her element made Marcus fall in love with her all over again. Christopher flourished, secure in the knowledge that he had 2 parents who loved him unconditionally. He started kindergarten at a school they chose together, made new friends, and continued to ask endless questions about everything from dinosaurs to where clouds came from, to why people fell in love. On a warm evening in June, exactly 1 year after that fateful gala, Marcus and Victoria stood in the small garden behind Victoria's gallery, surrounded by close friends and family. Christopher, wearing a miniature tuxedo and carrying the rings on a velvet pillow, walked solemnly down the aisle toward them. This time, when Marcus and Victoria exchanged vows, they promised honesty above all else. They promised to trust each other with their fears, their hopes, and their truths. They promised to put their family first, always. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, again, Christopher cheered louder than anyone else, rushing forward to hug both his parents at once. "Now we're a forever family," he announced with the certainty only a 5-year-old could possess. "Right, Daddy? Right, Mommy?" "Right," Marcus agreed, pulling both his son and his wife close. A forever family. As the reception stretched into the evening, Marcus found himself on the gallery's balcony, watching Christopher dance with Victoria inside. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, who had flown in from California for the wedding. "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become, and he would have absolutely adored his grandson." Marcus smiled, thinking of the father he had lost, the son he had found, and the woman he had loved, lost, and loved again. Life, he had learned, was full of unexpected twists and second chances. The key was recognizing them when they appeared, and being brave enough to reach for them. Victoria appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," Marcus said simply. "How close I came to missing all of this." "We both made mistakes," Victoria reminded him gently, "but we found our way back to each other. That's what matters." Inside, Christopher was showing off his dance moves to Marcus's business partner and his wife, completely unself-conscious and radiantly happy. Marcus watched his son, their son, and felt a profound sense of peace. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said, turning to Victoria. "We don't have to imagine what our future looks like anymore. We get to live it. Together. Every messy, beautiful, imperfect day of it." Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood there watching their son dance. 2 people who had found their way back to each other through loss and pain, and ultimately through love. The city sparkled around them, full of possibilities and second chances, and for the first time in years, the future looked exactly the way it should, full of hope, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Christopher caught sight of them on the balcony and waved enthusiastically, his smile bright enough to rival the city lights. Marcus and Victoria waved back, then went inside to join their son, their family, their forever.